Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for being here. My name is Carnahan. I am a multifaceted entrepreneur, and my main business, as we were just talking about, is Urban Village Design. So we are an ecological landscaping company. We offer design, installation, maintenance, and education to our community members. Oh, what? It's been sitting there for so long. Great. I also am part of Conscious Growth. I was one of the founding board members some years ago. I was part of the initial crew that brought Earthspace PDX into the world. I don't know, I probably do other things too, but those are like my primary things. And then on top of that, I have a company called Drake Nicks, and so that's my spiritual company. Actually I'll get into this in a little bit, but yes, I have all these different businesses that I have been working on over the years that each meet a different part of my inner uniqueness, and is part of why I wanted to teach about evolving business, because I think that we could do more sustainable business models, but we need more examples of them. So, getting into introductions, I just told you a little bit of who I am. I have a master's of science and sustainability education. I have my bachelor in social sciences with a minor in civic leadership. Got my permaculture certification, design certification in 2014. So I bring a permaculture perspective into what I do. And so that's kind of like my general education. And then the rest of it is self-taught. And as you'll see, I've worked on a lot of jobs, and that has given me a very unique perspective on all types of occupations. So yeah, and then before we get into the land acknowledgement, let's settle in together. So we're going to do a quick meditation. So get really comfortable in your seats. Take a big deep breath into your heart space. Let it out with another breath. We're going to bring our energy in through the mouth, down through the heart, and down through the base of our spine into the earth, like roots growing in through the soil. With every breath, we allow our roots to grow deeper, to become stronger. In our roots, we allow ourselves to feel our values. It's here in our foundation where we pull our unique ways of being and seeing into the world. It's what guides our actions. Allow yourself to acknowledge which values live here for you. Allow your roots to continue on through the waters, the aquifers that keep our land hydrated. Down, 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 feeling your roots growing bigger and outward as they connect with all the other root systems of all the other beings that share this planet. Look at the interbeing that exists here. The way that communities nourish one another. How we share resources. And with another breath, we're bringing the energy out from the earth, back up through our heart, and then up through the top of our head, into the branches of our energy field. It is here where we see the fruits of our labor, the gifts that we share with others. What gifts do you present to the world? See what beings interact with your branches, both the humans and the more than humans that come and take reprieve in your being. And bringing that energy down through the top of our head, back into the heart, we expand it out and around us, feeling the complexity that exists within and out, feeling the beauty of all of this chaos, but also seeing the harmony, seeing the perfection. Bringing our energy back to our center, to our core. We breathe into these bodies. We give thanks for the energy that moves through all things. We give thanks for these beautiful brains, the way that we get to think critically, creatively. And we give thanks for these strong, strong bodies that move us through the world. Allow yourself to move back into your body, shaking it out, feeling arms and legs, neck and head, torso. And then when you're ready, rejoin us in this space. Thank you for meditating with me. I wanted to start out here with a land acknowledgement of the many tribes that lived here before many of us arrived. So that includes the Clackamas, the Multnomah, the Kalapuya, the Malala, many, many more. I think it's really important that we acknowledge those that were in this space and cared for the land here, because as we're talking about business is often how we manage resources. Economics is how we take the resources from the natural world and then manipulate them to meet our needs, sometimes for good, oftentimes out of necessity. That's how most trade began, and also to excess at times. There's a beautiful quote by Gandhi that I am going to not say right, but it was something like, we have enough resources on this planet to make sure every person's basic needs are met, but we don't have enough resources even for one single greedy person. And so I think that we should look at that of like the history of business and how a lot of it pertains to people taking advantage of others in order to reap resources, take resources away, force people into areas where they have lack of resources. And that guides a lot of the work that I'm going to be talking about, of how we can reclaim business and economics in a way to move back towards equitable distribution of resources. So, talked a little about me. I want to know about each of you, so you can just say your name and why you were here and why you were interested in entrepreneurship and business.
Cool. I guess I'll start. My name's Ren. I'm also an entrepreneur. And I guess a multifaceted one. I have two separate businesses. One is a veterinary education company that I've just grown and automated. And the other business that I recently started is a coaching practice and healing retreat space, very much in its infancy. So I'm excited. I'm in a team building process and interested and excited to hear what nuggets of wisdom you have through your experience, and yeah, just open ears.
Melissa, also an entrepreneur. Been working for myself for the last 6 years. all virtual, basically. A little retreat spaces in between. I do astrology full-time and business consulting, so multifaceted as well. And yeah, I was invited by Ren, and I said I would come and join along and see what's going on. So I'm excited.
Awesome.
My name's Russell, and I am also an entrepreneur, like maybe everyone in this room. My interests, my driving force in my life has been to try to make the world a better place and be contributing something that I feel is actually important, and that's challenging and has come with a lot of difficulty along the way. So learning more how to do that as time goes on in a way that works. It's one of my reasons for being here and doing everything I do.
This is also co-founding member of Conscious Growth, which is a photography business.
That's right.
My name's Ashley, and I'm also co-founder of Conscious Growth. And I guess the main director. And I have like a kind of a side business called Wisdom Weaver, where I like to teach classes about ecology and spirituality, and also do like natural wall weavings. And I kind of integrate that with cool workshops with kids and stuff too. So yeah, I think Drake is a super inspirational person. That's why we've met and have been working together ever since. We met the same program at PSU. Yeah, and co-founded It's Space together as well. So now we're just learning from each other and evolving and growing, and it's been really inspiring to watch her start Urban Village Designs, and I'm excited to learn more about that whole journey.
Cool. Well, thank you for sharing. I definitely, like in this presentation, designed it for like a very beginner entrepreneurial path. But knowing that everybody here has a bit of entrepreneurship under their belt, I'll try to bring out more of like the details that I think you will find beneficial. Cool. Skip anything? Okay, so my professional journey is this. This isn't all of it. It's most of it, though. I think I covered everything that was super important along the way. There's a lot of volunteering that I didn't cover. All my travels I didn't cover. And then some of my education I didn't cover. So when I first started this path, I came out of like a suburban neighborhood, went straight to a university, joined a sorority, and had no concept of the world around me. And so that was about the time, I was like a pizza cafe waitress, and I worked at a resort because I wanted to get into hospitality management. I was a business major. And then I, worked at some of these jobs and realized that I didn't just want to serve people who were kind of jerks. And I realized the capitalistic system, as I saw it, had led me astray because I was disconnected from my environment. I had a major lack of social skills and leadership skills to bring to the world, and my worldview was very narrow. And so at about the time that I was 19, 20, I went through my own personal spiritual awakening and realized there was a big world out there that I needed to explore. And so I started basically taking on every single thing that I could that would challenge me to grow. And that came with a lot of hardship because I found that there was a lot of things I didn't like. The first thing that I really did was become a raft guide, and I loathed every moment of it. I love raft guiding, don't want to be in charge of other people's lives on the water. I also realized I did love outdoor education, and I did love leadership development. And so I put a lot of time into working professions that allowed me to learn about those types of subjects. when I was in college the first time around, I took a break and then came back and decided to take a gap year, so not covered here. I backpacked India for 3 months with a group of people that taught me how to live out of my backpack. And then I solo journeyed through South America for 7 months, totally by myself, hitchhiking around Bolivia and Argentina, had some crazy adventures through that. And so through this time, I was bouncing around between a few different categories, and I didn't really see a label to it, but I knew that those were things that I was drawn to, which was personal development and spirituality, the environment, so being in nature and learning everything I could about the natural world around me, and being of service. So I really wanted to be part of a community. I really wanted to be of service to people that were less, like, I don't know what's the word here that I want to use, people that needed support. So I worked with adults with disabilities multiple times. I worked with runaway youth. I worked with homeless youth. And I have a few positions on here that you can see that, and I did a lot of volunteer work in those areas as well. And so it wasn't until a little bit later, and I'll actually touch on this, but I was very inspired by Satish Kumar. I don't know if any of you have read his books before, but in particular, Soil, Soul, and Society was a book that I read in spiritual leadership in my second attempt at my undergrad. And it just it gave me this platform where I was like, oh, this is what I'm working on. I'm working on this holistic mindset. And so again, you can kind of see that through the course of my journey here. I highlighted a couple of important things. So my undergrad degree was really important. My permaculture certification, and then my master's degree as far as education goes. And then the ones in blue are the types of businesses or work experience that I took on that I kept with. So for a long time, I really felt like a failure because I couldn't keep a job more than 3 months to a year and a half, because I often would find that they didn't meet all of my holistic needs. And so part of that was I wasn't growing. They were positions where I kind of was just at a platform, and there was never potential to move beyond that, at least not quickly. I wasn't making enough money. Most of these positions, the reason I worked so many positions is that a lot of these industries only hired part-time. So they wanted 10 hours or 15 hours, which means I couldn't pay my bills. So I had to have multiple jobs, and at times I had 5 jobs at a time. I kind of liked it that way too, because I was getting lots of dynamic work experience. And in time, though, I found things that I really liked. So website design, I started that in 2014 as part of my undergrad degree. My professor asked me to start making a website for myself to promote me, which was weird, but I got behind it and kind of showcased my work up until that point. And that helped me to know the ins and outs of building a website from scratch. And then as I started trying out my own businesses, I tried to be a doula, I tried to be a photographer, I tried to have a terrarium business. That one website evolved and just kept becoming whatever I wanted it to be in that moment for whatever I was trying to do as my business. And then it slowly transformed into doing lots of websites for other people. I also mentioned earlier, since 2018, have been a soul guide and tarot reader. I've also done event production since that time. And that was a point where I was really concentrating on the soul, but I realized that I couldn't scale it. Very difficult to scale, because what I could do, I couldn't necessarily teach other people to do. Event production is difficult to make money in, and I wanted something that I knew that I could really just make big over time, create much bigger impact, bring on employees, and benefit other people's lives through that type of work. So as we continue on, eventually you see in 2020, that's when I started my own business, Urban Village Designs. And then within the first year, and up taking on multiple employees. We're at 9 employees now, so it's been a really cool journey of moving from just me and then seeing it take on its own form and shape and like biological, natural system of human beings that help me to run the business. So also through this, one thing that I wanted to touch on is that not only did I find a lot of these jobs didn't serve my holistic needs, I found, and this kind of is encapsulated in that, like on a mental level, I found that some of them really stressed me out, left me really drained. As a female, dealing with different, like physical issues, I found that there was major discrimination and guilt and shame when I needed to take breaks for myself. And so through these different jobs, it really informed me of what I didn't want to do to other people as a boss, and how I might structure a business in order to really care for the whole person, other people, no matter how they show up, which means like they could be going through a really hard time, and creating spaciousness for that. If people need to leave early, they totally can. If they need to like take a day off, they can. And so I think that compared to a lot of business models, I am probably much more flexible than other bosses, just because I really think that there is a great need for us to nurture human beings and create a little bit more spaciousness for how they want to exist in this moment based on where they are in their healing and development. Any questions on my career path? Cool. We can come back to it later, but there's a lot. So, holistic thinking, again, going back to Satish Kumar, here is this book, Soil, Soul, and Society. Highly recommend it if you've never read it. But this was the book that helped me to start to think about everything in terms of this right here. So the soil is the environment. Satish Kumar starts with the environment, with the soil, because all things come from the soil. The soil is what births forth, all the food that we eat, and it gives unconditionally, it transmutes unconditionally. We have the individual, which, we have the new agey idea of mind, body, and soul. This goes beyond that, where that is included. We're looking at our values and our personal resources. But we're also looking at that in context of the society in which we live. So we're looking at how do our lives benefit those around us, both our family, friends, community members, and then those that are beyond, looking at local, regional, and planetary communities that we impact through our lives. So this is kind of like a really basic breakdown of holistic thinking. Then we'll get into more too with this in regards to business. So why is entrepreneurship important? As all of you are entrepreneurs, what do you think is the benefit of having entrepreneurs in the world?
Innovation, opportunity, creativity.
Absolutely.
To me, a big part of it that I see is the ability for them to impact the world in the way that there is aligned with their values and their culture. What an entrepreneur brings to their community and society is a whole different contribution than maybe an established large business or previously established entrepreneurs have created. So to contribute something new.
Absolutely.
Yeah, new ideas, different perspectives, more diversity.
There's so many different reasons why entrepreneurship is important. I have a few on here. So trade as an opportunity for networking, connecting, and community building for resiliency. So how do we create different types of structures and businesses and roles that we're all fulfilling so that we can meet our needs? A big piece of this that I think is important is, yes, global economics is important. We all contribute to global economics in some way. The more that we can bring our professions to the places where we live, the better, or create opportunities for businesses to exist here. because in the face of any sort of like major disasters, big planetary changes that make it difficult for us to relate to people that are maybe farther away, it's important that we have these strong systems of entrepreneurs that exist here in the community in order to take care of one another. Increasing livable and valuable jobs. There is the beauty of like the independence that you get when you have your own job and you're able to make your own money. Taking the next step with that is when we can have employees, and if we design businesses that really care for the whole self. So we know that we're really cared for in the work that we do, and it's important to us because of values to create positions that also care for our employees. That is imperative to create healthy communities around us. I don't know why this one popped up at the bottom, but so I think there's some issues. There are current issues with our economic system, and I think in being an entrepreneur, you have to deal with taxes, insurance, licensing, random fees that you get depending on your industry. We learn how difficult it is to be a successful business owner. There is a major sense of privilege that comes with business owners that can succeed. There's opportunity out there, but it's definitely, you have to have a lot of capital. The access to capital is limited for some groups. And so I see our desire to be entrepreneurs and engage with these systems very important in helping us to understand what's not working so that we can understand how to potentially dismantle them, create new opportunities, new solutions that otherwise we wouldn't get to encounter when you're not on the entrepreneurial journey. Those who have a job, or they just go and they get their paycheck and they take it home, and you have people that are above you that are doing that work, and it's a weight that we carry as business owners, so that other people can enjoy themselves. But I think this is a super important part of if we want to create systemic change, we have to be actively engaged with it. So that leads into businesses activism, using our businesses to feed back into our communities, bringing about creativity, the ingenuity, innovation, finding new ways to do things. Especially right now, I'm seeing a beautiful resurgence of human beings who really care about the environment and want to see different ways of doing things. And then connecting together to build those ideas and evolve them. And then, of course, expression, so art. How do we express our unique ways of being in the world to hopefully show something that's never existed before, to inspire more of what's possible for the future? Experiencing our own limitations in order to transform them. Entrepreneurship will make you continuously bump up against the things that you need to grow through. So some of them are personal, some of them are interpersonal, some of them are related to dealing with, political structures, regulations, but all those things are super important in creating really engaged, active citizens. And then building knowledge in order to be of service. So ultimately, all this information that we get it so that we can do our job really well, offer better services and products, and ultimately be of service to the communities around us so that we can lift up other people around us and help them to grow their businesses and what they're offering to the world. So, holistic entrepreneurship, kind of bringing together the basic holistic platform that we looked at. I have on the outside all of the different things that might go into your business. Take a moment to look over this and see if there are, which pieces of this are related to your business. And then on the inside, we have values that kind of go along with this. So, I made it so that, in some of these circumstances, you might think in ecology, resources fit into their natural resources, and they don't really fit into any of the other bubbles. But ultimately, for an option like that or an element like that, the resources you're personally connected to, because you're connected to the community members who are bringing those resources, to you. There's hopefully a value alignment there that you're choosing those resources because they align with who you are. And so within this, of all these different pieces that are within your business, you should be able to see how they connect on all three areas. Does anybody want to try to choose like one of these that relate to your business and talk about how it engages the personal, the ecological, and community?
I can try.
Yeah.
So for personal's clients, right? So
Yeah.
having one-on-one clients, having like client-facing offerings, that trickles into community as well because some of those offerings are community-based. So that funnel kind of comes around the circle, like one-on-one, okay, community-based, how does that person fit into the community that's like established already? And ecological, I'm trying to think of how that fits into my business.
Yeah. I can give you an example.
Yes.
So if we're talking about clients, on the personal, you're impacting that individual. They're radiating out from the work that you're doing and creating more beneficial relationships, hopefully, with those around them, because the work that you do helps people to have insights, they give them self-reflection. And so you're impacting a sense of place, of like how they interact with their environment. You're also offering a lot of online opportunities, which means you're cutting down on transportation and giving people an opportunity to do their self-work from a central location that doesn't require them to drive across town. So on the environmental side, you're benefiting them because you're giving them that option.
I also have carbon offsetting as part of like my
Yes.
downsell and like offerings. So yeah, there's parts of each of those.
Absolutely. Anybody else want to give it a try? I can give you another example.
Still taking it all in.
Yeah, great. So it's best to just focus on one thing. So let's say tools and equipment. And you could say like how you benefit or maybe how you could do better in this category. So tools and equipment. If I wanted to do really good, which I do, I would buy all of my tools and equipment that have been made locally or are from mom and pop shops. Personally, that's important to me because I want high quality tools. They last longer, and so I just like see the value in buying tools that are made better. Ecologically, I know that they're better for the environment. They can be. We can look for businesses that produce tools that maybe come from renewable resources. And then community, I can benefit my community from buying those locally. The reality is sometimes we buy our tools locally or from like mom and pop shops. Some of the tools themselves may not be made locally. Or we are on a site somewhere kind of like far out. One of my staff calls me and he's like, hey, I need a shovel. I forgot mine today. And I'm like, okay, go and buy it. And he just buys like the first shovel we can find. So we're not always perfect. But this is one way that we can work to gauge of like how are we on this scale of sustainability. I'm trying to think like maybe like one more. Licensing and fees is really applicable to us. We have a growing amount of different types of licenses that we need and fees and different things that come up. Also within that field, I would say is certification. So on a personal level, it is kind of burdensome financially for me. So this is an area that I see the inequities of business because, okay, so for my industry, to register my business was like $600. Then to apply for my license was $170, and then I have to take a series of tests. All of them are $75. If you fail, you have to pay again. And then you have to have business insurance, which is over $1,000, and you have to be bonded, so that's $200. And those are all annual fees. So if you're just starting out with a business, you're looking at a couple $1,000s just to begin, not including tools, just to have a business that is legal, and then annually you're paying those fees again, and they're often increasing because you're having to get maybe like more advanced licensing fees. So personally, it's taxing. Community-wise, I don't know that those fees that I'm paying really benefit anybody in terms of licensing, but I do believe in insurance. That's an important piece of that category. And ecologically, I don't think that the landscaping corporation that exists or organization gives back to the land. They're not really improving their education, so I don't feel that those fees are benefiting all of these. So that's an example of how you can look at it the other way, of like, how can we be critical of the types of things that go into our business and how they relate into this. And then with certifications, like we are part of Backyard Habitat, so that's like bringing it back local. So personally, I think that using natives is a great idea because it increases resiliency in our landscapes. It benefits native wildlife. And community-wise, I love that there is a big, group of people that are coming together to plant natives. It's something that people nerd out on, so I love to be part of that. And then ecological, I've already touched on the ecological, so that's just a really basic way that I can touch on all of those in a beneficial way. So I wanted to talk a little bit about fragmentation and disconnection versus wholeness. So looking at what we just were looking at, and I'll go back to that slide. There, again, there's the environmental, the personal, and the community. Fragmentation to me are situations in which we maybe can't be our true self. So we show up to a job and we feel like we have to hide some part of our personality. Our values don't align. Maybe we're asked to do something that doesn't make us feel good. So physically, the bodies are just not equipped. So for example, one of the jobs I worked had me on graveyard, and every time I worked that shift, I would be very ill. It just made me super nauseous. And I tried to keep doing it, but I never felt good in my body, and I realized it wasn't a job for me. So when we're looking at positions, I think it's really important to look at what creates the wholeness within us, and what do we know that we don't need to be successful. So another thing for me, I don't like 9 to 5s. I have spurts of energy where I get a lot done, and then sometimes I need to rest. And so I built a position that allows me to honor that within myself. For community, things that fragment, let me think of a good example for community. So when we have unhealthy patterns of relating, so gossiping, or putting people down, or not trying to create community in the spaces where we live, that's fragmenting. Bullying, that goes into that. That raft guide position that I had, and some other positions that I have been in over the course of my life, I experienced really bad bullying within that space, and so I couldn't do my job because I felt really unsafe. So it's personal, but also goes into community, how the community itself is fragmenting itself. Also working or choosing products that aren't made in community, that fragments your community because you're not putting money back into the communities where you live. And then environmental, choosing products or practices that are detrimental to the places where you live. So in my line of business, that might be putting plastic in the ground, using pesticides. We don't do those practices because I think that's really important to make sure that we're only putting renewable sources back into the earth. So that's one area that we're looking in, that we can create wholeness rather than fragmentation. or disconnection. I initially used the word fragmentation in this because in my mind's eye, I see this like fragmenting process. But I also think about when we have these issues, which are surrounded, like we're surrounded by these things in our society, economically, politically. It's very difficult for us to make 100% sustainable and regenerative choices all the time. It's just not possible. So we're constantly picking and choosing. But because we have those types of opportunities around us and fragmentation and even disconnection, there's opportunities to build bridges. There's opportunities to fill those spaces with new solutions. So just some of the things that I was thinking about between fragmentation and disconnection, because the disconnection also can go into just like no knowledge at all of how our actions impact the personal, environmental, and community, or the fragmentation where we know that it's not good for these different categories, but we do them anyway out of just lack of care, apathy, or oftentimes like economic positions where a lot of us maybe just don't have the resources to always, choose the best product. So looking at this either in your personal life or in business, can you think of an example of something where you've seen fragmentation in one of these categories?
I have an example that was popping in my head as you were speaking. I don't know if it has to do with my business, but I'm just thinking about like during the pandemic when eating in a restaurant wasn't a thing and everybody was getting takeout and the takeout containers, and it's just like I feel like shit about this, but like this is what I have to do in this moment if I want to like get food from this place. And then you're at this thing like, okay, do I just make my own food at home, or can I treat myself to food out? And I kept feeling like I was in this predicament against my values throughout that whole time.
Yeah, I think a lot of us experienced that because there was also the discomfort of going to the grocery store and judgment around that. How often were you going to the grocery store? And so it created this sense of kind of just, it was a lockdown. It was a feeling of like not being able to make the choices that we want to, and then having to compromise merely to get by. And I think that is an interesting example too, because we all got used to maybe like ordering out a lot more, and now that industry is like it's so much more successful than it used to be, because we realize that there's an easier way to get food sometimes that doesn't require us eating, which is a fragmenting process of us getting farther away from where our food comes from.
It's also a really good example to see how economics drive those choices in those industries, that like the cheaper product is always, they're going to choose it because it's cost effective. And that's
cheaper and easier.
Yeah, that's challenging.
Yeah. And that's something as business owners, entrepreneurs, we have to look at of, when we offer our products and services, how do we do so in a way that honors us, still is affordable to other people, but allows us to make a living wage. And that's very difficult to do within, like the constructs that we're working within. And so yeah, I'm constantly dealing with that. Like our work of like how do we like charge the prices that we need to, and if we're too expensive for somebody, then they're going to end up going with a landscaping company that maybe is doing really awful things for the environment, but that's just where that person's price point is, and that's they're going through that disconnection because they would rather spend less than do better for the planet. Any other examples?
Well, I think the last part you brought up was a pretty big one that entrepreneurs experience, is having to make the decision between something that might be survival based for them, having to make the ethical decisions that you're faced with when the economic reality seems to force your hand one way or another. Maybe you see the ethical decisions that other business owners have to make as well. Sometimes the economic situation can seem too powerful for you to be able to push back and make the better choices that don't lead to the fragmentation.
And that goes for both like us as entrepreneurs and our clients. You know, we're all grappling with the like financial insecurity around us. That does make it difficult to always make the best decision. I think also another point that is important again of like the disconnection. There's just a lack of education around so many things on our planet, and so when we're doing our work, I think it's so important that we include the educational piece of helping people to make better decisions, whatever that might be too, because all of our industries are so different. And so, you know, like it might just be like, you know, business consulting or, you know, like helping people to get aligned with the path that they're supposed to be walking. But it could be like nature education or, you know, like mindfulness. But that's like, as entrepreneurs, I think that like, yeah, we have businesses and services, but we're also educators because we have real lived experience that others need to see. Okay, so in designing for you, most of you have already figured out what your entrepreneurial paths look like, at least to this point. And so the first question for each of your businesses, I want you to think about what is your relationship with nature and how does your business or work connect you with the care of natural spaces, if at all. And what might you add or change to deepen your ecological impact? And it doesn't have to be business specific. It could just be in your own personal life, but you could tie it to your business in some way. This was meant to be a written opportunity, so if you have a journal and want to write about it, you totally can.
Are you asking for any verbal response?
Yeah.
So for the first question, what is my relationship with nature? So that's like very broad of a question, but it does play into my work and connects in with my work because I do locational astrology. So I focus on the location of the earth and what land are you inhabiting and how do you take up space and how is that connected with your choices that you've made to be here, right? And why have you chosen this land? And subtly, I've just been encouraging others to just go find that land for themselves. Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of the clients that I see are living in big cities. They're disconnected from the land. They don't have, you know, this relationship where they can go outside and sit with a tree or hear the birds or do these things that really bring us back into a space of equilibrium. So it's something that's really important to me and, you know, encouraging others to just, sometimes we think we're lost, but actually we're just disconnected from the space that we're taking up.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you brought that up because a big piece of that like ecological side of a holistic model is looking at sense of place and like how do we ground into where we're living and feel a greater sense of responsibility. Stewardship is the word I often use with my clients of, you know, you have the space that you're inhabiting. You know, I don't like to use the word ownership. On paper, somebody might own a space because they had access to the resources that gave them access to owning. But ultimately, nobody owns the space. We're giving the opportunities to be stewards, and it's important that we act that way. And so in our businesses, we can encourage people to deepen into that sense of place.
In a lot of the work that I was doing, and then just a lot of my involvement, maybe 10 to 6 years ago, was very low resource impact types of work, and you know, the types of organizations I was with were able to use an extremely low amount of things like fossil fuels and waste. And as things progressed in my life, I got involved in other projects and other groups where there seemed to be much more demand of resource and expense and cost as time went on, and I would find myself missing being able to do things at a much lower material investment and a much lower waste or pollution or other kinds of impacts. And I find that even now, even though there seems to be like a certain level of requirement of how much we have to use and how much waste there has to be involved in just like putting on certain productions and certain events and running certain projects, I still always want to look to see how less can be used. And a lot of the time the requirements on having a greater waste and greater consumption is legal requirements. Usually there are certain policies or legal requirements on that type of production or that type of program that like requires higher waste, and that's always disappointing, and it never feels very good. But it's there are these outside forces requiring you to pollute more or waste more when otherwise you would choose not to. But always choosing to find ways that do less of that to the best that you can legally is a good way to help support your natural environment and your healthy relationship with nature.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you bring up a great point there that like most of our economy works on the mentality of consumption over conservation, and taking it beyond conservation, regeneration. And so as business owners, we're in a unique position to see, okay, well, this is where I am right now. I know that I could potentially do better, but what are the steps that maybe I would need to take to do that? Are there legal policies in place that are preventing me from taking that action? And then what are the steps that I might take in order to engage with the political systems around me to change that? And that's, kind of going back to what we were talking about at the beginning, is that when you have a business, you are like actively seeing what types of policies are actually really hurting the environment. And then, trying to get creative on your own, sometimes doing things that aren't legal because you know that it's better, and waiting for the society around you to catch up. So, yeah, thanks for bringing that. Cool. So question 2, what are your needs and wants as it relates to your personal care? Are these needs currently satisfied in your business or work? And what would you want to change to better take care of your whole self? And I can start with this actually. So, I built this business of mine, my landscaping business, wanting to create a position that would allow me to grow and to scale and to use all kinds of different skill sets. So, I built this business from the ground up. I do the website design, I do the leadership development, I do all of the consults and the design and the installation and the education. And so every day looks so different, and I love that. I love that I get to engage all these different pieces within myself. And at the same time, I do realize that I experience burnout really easily, and this business feels like a machine that I have to keep, tending to. And as we grow our businesses, you can automate, you can delegate, you can create systems that work for you so that your job can get easier. But especially at the beginning of running a business and designing it, you're not quite sure what those systems look like, and you might be the system. And so for most of this time period, I am in the system, and sometimes that means I have to sacrifice my health or my energy, my relationships around me in order to keep the business functioning. And so that was one of the reasons why I brought on employees, was so that I could begin to train other people to take over some of my positions so that I could have a better work-life balance. And so that's what I'm working on right now. I wonder, with both of you who have your own businesses, how do you feel about managing your time?
Well, one part of my, one component of my veterinary education business is burnout recovery and trauma work. And so I'm very present with when burnout is happening. And when I get a little overly task oriented. And so nervous system regulation is something that I talk about quite a bit in both of my businesses. And, you know, looking at question 2, I really see how that relates into what I'm bringing into my new business. And there's so much of it is finding myself in a space where I can really drop into states of regulation and holding that space and kind of protecting that space so that it can be available for others to do the same, because I know that that work is so important. And, you know, it is through that connection with Earth that we can really drop in and like connect with ourselves. And I'm feeling really grateful for positioning myself in a place where those needs are being met and creating a space where others can come and have those needs met as well, because it's highly valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's beautiful as business owners that we are able to create that spaciousness and, you know, set some strong boundaries for ourselves, because, you know, on the other side, our clients, those we serve, there might be this expectation of availability, and when we set the standards around ourselves for how we want to treat ourselves, we remind those who we're working with that they can do the same for themselves, and then we create rippling effects of people who begin to think about, you know, business a little bit differently, where it doesn't need to be constantly on, but it's okay to rest, it's okay to be off. And that's something that I work with a lot with, you know, my clients of, you know, like we're going to try to be there at this time every other week, but sometimes people get sick or something happens where we just can't be there. We're going to have to reschedule. And so flexibility is just, it's written into our values so that clients know from the get-go that they can expect that.
You kind of make a good point about like creating systems that communicate clearly. I find that people do really well with communication ahead of time, expectations, and like a lot of expectation management on the front end, so that I can relax into my schedule and like how I do things and my flow without feeling like, oh my God, I need to get back to these people right this second. Like nothing is an emergency.
It always feels like it, though. That's-
Yeah, I worked in emergency medicine for 24 years, and I'm like, we're fine. You're gonna be fine. In the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. Anybody else want to touch on question 2?
I can answer it in relation to my like 9 to 5 nonprofit job, which is different from my passion project nonprofit. I think some big benefits are having health insurance, even though it's a frustrating system that we live in. I'd much rather have it be more holistic and less privatized, but just having that sense of security is nice. And then also I have a lot of paid time off, which is really great. And like right off the bat too, it doesn't have to accrue after working so many hours, which I think is really and a lot of my work is remote. It's kind of like a optional flex hybrid position where like I can go to the office if I want. And we have like once a month kind of required meetups, but other than that, I can like take my laptop wherever I want and do work. But I also think I'm highly underpaid, especially in the nonprofit industry. It's hard because you're kind of just getting funded through grants, and you don't really know if that position is going to be a long-term position if that funding runs out. So like I would want to be able to ask for a raise, but I don't know if that's even something that's possible for the organization. And I think at the time of being hired, it seemed like a fair salary, but just with the economic inflation that's happening right now, it's like, oh my gosh, this actually isn't working. But it's not really their fault, but it's just like what's happening to the entire system, and it's hard to catch up. So yeah, it's just my thoughts about what my needs are.
Yeah, totally. And I love that you touched on all of that because you're looking at it from like the employee perspective. There's a lot of holistic things that are happening there where the business is really trying to care for you as best that it can. And as you said, there's, like a lack or a limitation on funding. And as business owners, from the other side, that there's only so much that you can funnel in. Like, for my employees, I would love to be able to pay them more. And when I initially brought people on as staff members, I started everybody off at $20 an hour. And they weren't employees yet, and so it was not under the table, but I didn't have to worry about taxes. And then once I made the transition to making everybody employees, all of a sudden it was 30% in taxes, so 15 included in what I was already paying them, plus an additional 15, plus workers' comp, plus something else that I have to pay per hour. And so all of those things add up where, my employees make $20 an hour, but I'm actually paying $20 an hour to have them on payroll. And so those are things from behind the scenes, you don't necessarily see as an employee, but employees have needs, and we are dealing with this time period of inflation, and what seems like a living wage, $20 plus, might not be, if that's even where you are, because a lot of people aren't over $20. They're still, somewhere around the 15 range, depending on where you live in the States, and it's just not enough to keep up with the growing pressures of being able to meet our resource needs. Okay, question 3. So how does your business or work connect you with your community, and how does it serve the community around you?
I think this one for me is sometimes when I think about all of the people I've met with or just have found me or you've come together with, it's very much a global community, and I think that's something really fun that I think about is this week I read, with clients from Europe and from Asia and from America and from those 3 continents. So to me that feels really special, and then having this kind of weaving of okay, how does this come into personal relationships? Where do those people come in a physical way, right? And how do we connect with the community around me? So doing in-person events or just meetups or things like that really kind of fulfill that need for me, and having people that are local to Portland or wherever I'm living. So yeah.
That's beautiful. I love the expansiveness of that impact, and that it's not limited to just right here, but you are able to make those really beautiful, genuine connections with others. And I think that's also an important part of the entrepreneurial journey is working with diverse groups of people and learning cross-cultural communication. So while working right here is important, we do have to be are offered those bridges to work with others that we might not usually talk to.
I find it a lot more fulfilling when I work with like local community in person, like events like this, or just like other meetups that involve education and art and music. Because I feel like when you work with people online, sometimes it can still feel a little disconnected, especially if they're like all the way across the world in a different time zone and maybe speak a different language. Because my two different nonprofit jobs are just like completely opposite. Like one of them is like global, focused on renewable energy, and the other one's like local, focused on like community events. And just like comparing the two, I feel a much deeper sense of community here in Portland, and I find a lot more fulfillment in that work. But I feel like it's also important though to like expand what you're doing globally, because if you're just like having this hyper focus, it doesn't have as big as a ripple effect. So I don't know, I feel like there's pros and cons to both.
Absolutely.
I like thinking about things like, I don't know, like in human design terms, you know, you have like the individual level and then the tribal level, like what you're talking about, and then like the collective level. So I think like kind of a lot of how I process information is like through my individual experience, and how does this apply to like the collective, like humanity as a whole, and by doing that action on an individual level, influencing the collective on a whole, even, you know, if it's like maybe somebody that I don't ever have physical contact with, or even online, you know, it's just like on a energetic influence kind of way.
Yeah, we live in such a unique time period right now with the types of technology that we have available to us, because we can continue to nurture these relationships around us, which I think we need a reminder to do, and some of us are really good at it, but I also know groups of people who stay at home and spend a lot of time with online communities and don't get that same face-to-face connection. And I think both are important because, you know, as a collective, a human collective, it's so important that we are communicating with each other about experiences that are happening in different places so that we can stay in the know about, you know, collectively what we're looking at, because it's not just our little towns and cities or even country anymore that are going to be experiencing changes. Now, as a global community, we're going through really significant changes together, and I don't foresee that stopping. And so it's important that we build those relationships both locally and abroad. And I think that's part of the holistic piece too. You know, we need both in order to find ourselves in a strong position to make systemic change over time. Any other thoughts on this? I did want to say, connecting with community with your business. So depending on the type of business you have, some of these won't factor in as much. But within a business, you have your owners or investors. You have your employees. You have your clients. You have your contractors. You have your distributors. You have greater community members. You have the political structure around you that you might bump against. And so for me, I love that my business touches all of those, and that I get access into like building all these really unique, diverse relationships, and also that within my field, I'm working to move away from competition, because in most business, at least when I was in business school, there was so much emphasis on the competitive nature of business. But I've found that collaboration is so helpful to my business model because there's going to be jobs that I don't want to take on. So I subcontract them, or I just give them to other companies that I know are value aligned or value aligned enough, and so they'll maybe do the types of things that I don't want to do because maybe my values aren't totally aligned with the client. And there's just like, I can see this web of different relationships that are constantly being strengthened and growing, and so it helps, I feel, within my business model that I'm very centered in community in that way. So question 3 feels very relevant. So this is kind of the last piece of this, and it's really just like an introduction because the spectrum of success is this, what do I want to call this? It's an activity that I will be bringing into the more in-depth workshops that I eventually do. I don't know why profit motivation is there twice. It shouldn't be. It's important, but not that important. But ultimately, each of these categories, you rate yourself from 1 to 10, and it creates a kite. And I don't have an example of that today because we're just kind of touching on it lightly. But within the spectrum of success, I see these 4 categories as necessary components to having a thriving business that can grow over time. So the first one is profit motivation. Ultimately, you know, like we don't necessarily want to be driven by profit, but in order to have businesses that can feed you and your employees or those who you work with, you have to be bringing money in. In order to grow your business, you need capital in order to expand. And so you have to have a little bit of profit motivation in order to be successful. The second one, does the world need it and why? So not just want, because yes, people want things, so why does the world need the thing that you're offering? How does it make the world a better place? How does it help people to grow? So touching on that category of, you know, like, do you see that it promotes like a healthy value system that helps people to become better people through what you're offering? The third piece is scalability and collaborative potential. I put these together because to scale means that you grow your impact. It means that you grow your ability to present your offering to the world. And so that means that there might be some collaborative potential. If you're doing something that's more singular, so let's say, you know, for a while I was doing my online sessions and I was doing some event production, and then I got into being a YouTuber. It was a short life, but it was there along the way. And so I had somebody who did videography who showed me how to do YouTube videos. I could have taken that a step farther if I really wanted to go farther and hire somebody to do the editing for me because it was so time consuming. I think that's probably the main reason why I didn't keep up with the YouTube videos. But that would have been a way for me to scale what I was offering by bringing other people onto the team to help to promote my message. So we can look for opportunities like that, collaborative potential of bringing employees on, training other people, creating systems so that other people can complete the tasks that you need to do. Super necessary if you want to grow your business. Also, a piece of this as well is with the businesses that we have, if you were to step away from your business and you needed time off, so let's say that there was a sickness or you were going through a really traumatic time period, or maybe a really happy time period, maybe you had a baby, or your best friend had a baby and she had nobody, you needed to go spend time with her, like, would you be able to leave your job, not work for an extended amount of time and still bring in money? And so looking at businesses where there's some piece of your business that keeps making money for you, even if you have to walk away. And then the last piece is personal fulfillment and value alignment. So does your work call to your whole self? Do you feel fulfilled by the work that you're doing when you show up? Are you engaged to the depths of you? Do you feel like you're growing and learning all the time and just like actively inspired by the work that you're doing? Because that's what you should be looking for. And so when we look at the spectrum of success, we do a 1 to 10 for each of those. It's on a little table, and then you map out what it looks like. And depending on where you're at, you might have kind of a lopsided kite. You might have one that's really big, you might have one that's really narrow. It doesn't mean that it's not going to be successful, but it gives you kind of a feeling about, you know, what type of success you might see over time. And if you do want to maybe make your kite more expansive, you look at ways that you can grow in each of these categories. So it's just like an overview, and if you choose to take my workshop later on, we'll actually dive into that and explore it a lot more in depthly. So I think that is pretty much it for today, except that I want to leave you with this. This business sutra I took from Steve over at Anthea. He has it written on a little piece of paper. We were talking business one day, and he shared this with me, and I really liked it, and so I wanted to pass it on. Within these are enhance the well-being of others, so making sure that we're having these beautiful relationships as we develop our businesses. Respect your commitments as best as you're able, so making sure you show up, doing what you can to make sure that you're fulfilling your agreements. Act with absolute equanimity, so allowing yourself to be balanced, allowing yourself to be open-minded, I think goes into that as well. Convey true impressions, so authenticity, but also accountability is part of that. So within our businesses, how do we hold people accountable and make sure that we're all growing and that we're all showing up as our best selves? And if we're not, how do we have conversations to navigate those in order for healing to occur? Bring people together, because community is where magic happens. Speak professionally and respectfully. Respectfully. Yeah, I think that's like, you understand what that is. Find happiness in what you have. So no matter where you are, recognizing that there's beautiful growth and perfection in this moment, and that there is something that we can utilize from what we have in order to keep growing. Celebrate others' achievements. I think this goes into that collaborative piece. So moving away from competitive mindsets, finding ways that we can collaborate and build each other's businesses up together, and see the hidden potential of all things. So in Leadership for a New Science, I believe is what that book is called, Margaret Wheatley, she talks about like this chaos theory, that in these moments where just everything is shifting, it is a perfect space for things to come back into alignment in a way that it previously wasn't. And so every time that we add a new element, every time that we introduce something new, there's the potential for something else to be born. And so it's so important as entrepreneurs and as people in the workforce to put our ideas out there so that we can evolve our ideas off of one another. Any questions, comments, ideas? Sweet. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I will be around for a few minutes if you want to have any more conversations. You can learn more about my business at www.urbanvillagedesigns.com. I'm on Instagram and social media at Drake Nix Vision. And yeah, thanks everybody for being part of this.
Thank you.